This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gitu-Yuat. It's Tuesday, October 1st. This is Africa 54. Botswana begins offering free antiretroviral therapy to foreign sex workers. The Nigerian government responds to a wave of kidnapping sweeping across the West African nation. And a closer look at how world leaders can step up efforts to better prepare their countries for global health emergencies. In an effort to fight HIV, the Southern African nation of Botswana is offering free antiretroviral therapy to foreign sex workers. This action follows a decision to extend treatment to non-citizens. An estimated 30,000 foreigners living in Botswana are HIV positive, and most are sex workers. Until now, the country was of only a few that did not offer treatment to non-citizens. Mkondisi Dube reports from Gaborone.
35-year-old Mary Banda is an HIV-positive sex worker from Zambia. In deteriorating health, she has struggled to get treatment since she arrived in Botswana in 2018. But now she has a lifeline thanks to a Botswana government decision to offer the life-prolonging antiretroviral therapy to non-citizens.
I'm very happy because most of people, they'll be saved, especially those who were struggling from taking ARV back home. When they called us and they started helping us, we couldn't believe that it's really happening. We thought that they're just talking.
Banda says health officials have been helpful and monitor how sex workers respond to treatment.
After they've given us, they make sure that they do follow up to check if the tablets are okay, if there's nothing like side effects or whatever.
The Botswana government's move has been hailed by NGOs as a positive step in fighting against the epidemic.
As an organization, we are excited that the government of Botswana has made such a progressive move. Sexual relationships are indiscriminate. So that is to say, we cannot provide ARVs for one portion of a certain portion of people who live in the country and yet not provide the same treatment to another subset of the residents of the country.
The local sex workers organization Sisonke also welcomes the move.
We are very excited by this move. It's long overdue because we've been fighting for migrants to get ARVs. It's a milestone.
But for now, of the estimated 30,000 HIV-positive foreigners in Botswana, only 7,000 are getting treatment, according to the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. Mkondisi Dube for VOA News, Gaborone, Botswana.
A recent wave of abductions in Nigeria is raising fear across the country. Unlike kidnappings involving oil militants in the south or Boko Haram in the north, which often take on political dimensions, experts say this crime wave spans through every region and is driven largely by economic hardship. Timothy Obiezu tells us how the government is trying to fight back.
Olumide Peter was on his way back from an evening class of the International Institute of Journalism in Abuja when several men hijacked his car and took him away.
So I tried to maneuver myself to open the door. They overpowered me. They hit me with a spanner and some vehicle tools. And immediately the guy came out with a gun. He said he was going to kill me.
He was held for several days and tortured until an unknown amount was paid to the kidnappers. Last week, tens of kidnappers captured across Nigeria were paraded publicly in Abuja. Nigeria is seeing an unusual wave of abductions that is cutting across every socio-economic class. According to the police, 685 kidnappings occurred countrywide in the first quarter of the year, an average of 7 per day. Kidnappers demand between $1,000 to $150,000 as ransom, depending on the financial resources of the victims. In the past, Many abductions were traced to militants in the south agitating against oil companies of the Islamist militant group Boko Haram in the north. But security experts say the recent abductions are the result of Nigeria's economic hardships and poverty.
In fact, most of us saw it coming because there is hunger in the land. And Nigeria has been on economic doldrum for some years now. And crime will increase, definitely, because people will become more desperate.
The Nigerian government has responded to the wave of kidnappings by setting up an abduction response team. Nigeria police spokesperson Frank Mba says the team is making some progress.
That there's actually a decrease, a significant drop in the rate of kidnapping in Nigeria. And this drop began to manifest itself soon after the launching of Operation Pofada, a very little, a very functional, a very effective and efficient anti-crime strategy.
But security expert Senator Irebu says the Nigerian police force may be unprepared for the tasks ahead.
The number of our police force is not near to the standard, United Nations standard, per 500 people or 1,000 people within a space. So we are short of manpower, we are short of intelligence, we are short of communal cooperation that we need.
Experts like Irebu believe if triggers like unemployment and poverty can be reduced, the abduction wave would get smaller too. While security officials crack down on perpetrators, victims like Olumide move on with their lives, careful about where they go, aware that they could be a kidnapping victim again. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja.
There's more disturbing news out of Nigeria. Police in Lagos have freed 19 women and girls who had mostly been abducted and impregnated by captors planning to sell their babies. Serena Chondre has more.
These are some of the women and girls who were rescued from a baby factory in Lagos. Brought from all over Nigeria with promises of work, they were instead abducted and impregnated by captors planning to sell their babies.
We rescued 19 pregnant girls, mostly from ages 15. The highest, the oldest person there is 28, but majority of them are teenagers who are pregnant and being kept in those locations with the sole aim of them giving birth, and those who kept them there to sell the babies and make money out of it. We got 2 suspects arrested, and we are still looking for one.
Police said the raid had taken place on September 19 but kept secret until now to enable them to apprehend suspects. 2 women aged 40 and 54 have been arrested in connection with the case. One of the rescued women spoke about her ordeal.
The woman checked me, now put medicine in my private parts. Surgery, the neighbor started to do me. The baby is 7 months. I was in the neighbor complete 3 days. I did not deliver. Police people come and arrest us that we are the people that born and selling children.
Police said baby boys were sold for around $1,630 and girls for $980. The State Criminal Investigation Department will now take over the case, which comes just days after some 400 boys and men in chains and scarred from beatings were rescued from a building in the northern city of Kaduna. It will also work with other Nigerian agencies to resettle the women and girls and their babies.
That was Serena Chondre of Reuters with that report. In northern Nigeria last Thursday, police rescued more than 300 men and boys, some as young as 5 years old, and many in chains and bearing scars from beatings in a raid on a building that purported to be an Islamic school. Some of the children came from neighboring countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Ghana, while others had been dropped off by their parents. For more insight on this story, I'm joined by Grace Alheri Abdu, VOA Senior Hausa Editor. Grace, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you know, you've stayed on top of this story.
Yeah, very well.
What have you learned?
Well,
Even this morning, Esther, I spoke with the Commissioner of Women Affairs, Hajia Hafsat Baba, to find out what the situation is regarding these children. Unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, because when we first interviewed them, as the story broke, he told us that they are going to keep the children and they are going to conduct a thorough investigation to find out how they got there, what treatment they were receiving, and get as much information as possible, if possible, to prosecute anybody that they found they are able to see that, has anything to do with making these children suffer. But unfortunately, as at this morning, she told us that none of the children is under their custody. She said that all the parents came on that Friday and took their children. So the question I asked her was, how were they able to pick all their children? Because some of them came from the southern parts of Nigeria. There was one particular boy that we interviewed who is just 7 years old, who told us that he came from Onitsha. If you know Nigeria, it's a whole day journey from Kaduna to Onitsha. And if that story broke in the evening of Thursday, on Friday you said you are going to look for the parents and just get information, and then by Saturday, none of those children are under your custody. So that leaves so many questions, So yeah, that's the situation as at right now.
It's mind-boggling. So stay on top of the story. We'll get back to you, Grace. Thank you very much. Grace Alheri Abdu is a VOA senior Hausa editor. Now, the controversy over U.S. President Donald Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president continues, with Trump threatening both the whistleblower who outlined a detailed complaint about Trump's actions, as well as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who is now leading the impeachment inquiry. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump continues to lash out against Democrats as they move forward on an impeachment inquiry, including the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, whom he suggested should be arrested for treason. Trump also said he's trying to find out about the whistleblower who drew attention to his July phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Well, it was perfect. When the whistleblower reported it, he made it sound terrible. And then you had Adam Schiff, who, even worse, made up my words, which I think is just a horrible. I've never even seen a thing like that.
Last week at a closed event, Trump described the whistleblower as close to a spy. A person at the event provided the Los Angeles Times with a recording of his remarks.
You know what we used to do in the old days when we were smart, right? The spies and treason. We used to handle it a little differently than we do now.
Trump tweeted he deserves to meet his accuser and warned of big consequences. The whistleblower is expected to testify to lawmakers about his complaint against Trump's actions on Ukraine, but no date has been set. The law allows whistleblowers to report what they believe to be inappropriate behavior while protecting their identity and without fear of retaliation.
To try to penalize and criticize someone for following the law because of accusations that the president has not followed the law is once again something that is beneath the office of president and something that Americans expect better of.
Meanwhile, Democrats continue to investigate the whistleblower's allegation that Trump sought Zelensky's help in digging up incriminating information about his political rival, former Vice President Joe Biden.
He is using his office in a way that violates the United States Constitution. Okay, he does not have the right to take money appropriated and threaten to withhold it for his personal political views.
Last week, Trump confirmed he withheld military aid from Ukraine, saying he did so over concerns that the U.S. was contributing more to the country than European powers. Republican allies insist it is the Democrats who are politically motivated.
Our job is to legislate, not to continue to investigate something in the back when you cannot find any reason to impeach this president.
Democrats have issued a subpoena to President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, over his interactions with Ukrainian officials as they prepare articles of impeachment or charges against the president. If the House decides to impeach, the Senate will vote. A minimum of 67 votes, including from 22 Republican senators, is needed to remove the president from office. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
You're watching Africa 54. We'll be back.
beat.
Bantu.
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. When it comes to fashion, some designers say you should never feel like catwalk looks are unattainable. Instead of going for a full look, top fashion mavens suggest picking and choosing trendy fabrics and themes, or incorporating individual elements into your wardrobe, like hats and other accessories. The bottom line, if you love it, wear it. Meanwhile, glitz and glamour took center stage in Lahore, Pakistan, as major designers showcased their collections during the kickoff of the 3-day Pakistan Bridal Fashion Week. The event, hosted by the Pakistan Fashion Design Council, featured collections by 5 designers with another 14 still to display their wares. The overarching trend was plenty of sparkle, florals, and over-the-top glam. And in other wearable trends, taking the high-tech soldier into the digital battlefield is being showcased by Israel-based company Elbit Systems. The equipment, comprising of a visor, night vision goggles, wrist-mounted computer, and gun sight, will give soldiers better information during combat. Targets can be identified as friend or foe using augmented reality technology within the Smart Eye ballistic visor. The company says the technology has been tried and tested by armed forces. And that's what's trending today.
Dozens of activists have marched in the capital of Ghana to protest impunity surrounding attacks on women and girls in the West African country. The women activists added their voices to the global conversation about seeking justice for victims of sexual abuses and holding abusers to account. Stacey Knott reports from Accra.
Protesters marching through Accra, a sign that Ghana's Me Too movement is slowly gaining strength. Victims of domestic and sexual violence are publicly naming abusers, while authorities are being criticised for not making the safety of Ghana's women and girls a priority. Protest organiser Eugenia Barfor-Benko said the march was aimed in part to draw attention to a recent case of 4 young women who were kidnapped and murdered. Police have been widely accused of mismanaging the investigation.
The average Ghanaian woman is still, living the reality every day of living with the abusers, having to face the police or the justice system not supporting them at all, their community shaming them, everybody around. We still have a long way to go, I would say, but I think that all it takes is one step. That's why we're going to the field.
The march was promoted over social media, the central medium for the global Me Too movement.
I'm joining the march today to fight for violence against women. I think it's so important. Women are half of the population in Ghana, and yet we are targeted constantly.
Ghanaian radio broadcaster, activist and feminist Felicity Nana Nelson uses her work on the radio as well as her large social media following to hold perpetrators to account and advocate for the rights of women.
I'm putting gender on the agenda. That's the whole point. So when an issue comes up, it's like, okay, what is the woman's side of this? How are women being affected by this issue? So I try to bring that to the fore.
The protest ended with a candlelit vigil for all victims of sexual and domestic violence and to show solidarity with the Me Too movement worldwide. Stacey Knott for VOA News, Accra.
It's time for our health segment, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with some important news on tackling global emergencies. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. That's right. The Global Preparedness and Monitoring Board, an independent group of experts focused on global health emergencies, recently released a report assessing the world's current preparedness for a major health crisis. The report, called A World at Risk, concludes, among other things, that the world might not be prepared for such a crisis right now. I sat down with Elijah Assi, Secretary General of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies and co-chair of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, to discuss some of the findings in the report. Take a look.
The biggest threat that we are facing, of course, we know the big nasty ones that we are dealing with today, the hemorrhagic fevers such as Ebola that we experience going more and more into cities, going more and more inter-country, unlike what we used to see in the past, that it was quarantining itself in remote areas, and that in a global world it is a big threat. The Lassa fevers, Marburg fevers, the Nile fevers, all those ones that are happening almost on a monthly basis at any point in time in any part of the world that can go wild, particularly if they're happening in places that are fragile settings, and unfortunately many of those places where we have the outbreaks are fragile settings. One big one is the respiratory infection, like an influenza type, that can spread within days, all across the globe. We believe that the world is not prepared for that. But also in a fragile world, we are also quite worried about health security in many ways. The deliberate release, of bacteria and viruses, can become almost a biological warfare and then represent a threat.
To what extent is climate change affecting disaster preparedness, whether it's the type of outbreaks that we are seeing or we may see in the future?
In many ways, because climate change will lead to fragilities. And if you have fragilities, people will be developing strategies of survival that put them at risk themselves. If you have those fragilities, people will be moving, getting out of home because home is no longer safe, then being in situation of refuge, between situation of migration. And all those will exacerbate the kind of dysfunctionalities that we see, the risks and the vulnerabilities at the same time. If we have climate change continuing the way it is, we will be encroaching now more and more in the natural habitats of the fauna, and the cohabitation that we will have that is closer and closer between fauna and humans, is something that can be deadly, because the animals can live with many of the viruses and bacteria. We cannot survive it. So having a One Health approach that relates also environment and climate, animal health and human health, will be the type of integration that we will also would like to see. And none of that will happen unless we have the type of leadership that is required, that we are calling for. And that's why this report emphasizes so much leadership as key.
So what are some of the key indicators that reveal that a country is prepared to face disasters?
It will depend on the status of the health system in the country, how strong or how weak the health system is. It will depend on the surveillance capacity, the weakness or the strength of it. It will depend also on the interface between the community surveillance systems and community engagement with the formal systems of the public health. It will depend pretty much also on the level of investment and leadership that is exercised at country level to do that. And it will depend very importantly to the level of respect and implementation of the international health regulations, which are commitments made at the global level that also requires countries to fulfill those promises and those obligations.
What is the main takeaway then from this report?
The main takeaway of this report is that we will give in a very independent way, in sometimes a blunt way, what is the state of the situation. But it's not enough. We would like also to incentivize action. And we have 7 recommendations in this report, clearly recommending what needs to be done to make a difference. inaction has a very high cost, but there is an opportunity to make a difference. And this report highlights those opportunities and also highlighting some indicators that we will be monitoring very closely so that 1 year from now, when we watch, we will see progress. And where we don't see progress, we also come up with the required recommendations to move forward.
Now, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland is also co-chair of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. Dr. Brundtland elaborates on the need for leaders to step up efforts to better prepare their countries for health emergencies.
Having looked at the analysis and the recommendations that have been made already by the Secretary General's panel after the terrible Ebola outbreak 4 or 5 years ago, we have seen that the follow-up to all the necessary work that needs to be done to increase the world preparedness for such outbreaks have been going too slowly. Much of it has not been implemented. It is the government leaders who are responsible. Preparedness has to happen at the community level, regional and country level, and of course at the international level, because these things are interlinked. From each individual who falls ill and can carry an infectious disease that can spread, to something that can spread across the world to millions of people. Like we saw in 1918 with the big influenza pandemic that killed many millions of people and ravaged economies and really created havoc. This is kind of one of the dramatic emergencies that could reoccur. We don't know when, but we can be reasonably sure that it will happen. And then we need to be much better prepared to avoid loss of human life and undermining of our economies, as would be the result.
The report also recommends, among other things, to increase funding for the poorest and most vulnerable countries. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @Lenore. Esther?
Thank you so much, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.